Hello, I'm Wendy Wilson, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Realizing Potential. Today I have with me in the studio a person I met probably about 2 months ago. We have a very mutual friend that we have lots of admiration and respect for, and she boasted you all have to meet each other, and I was immediately struck by her just special engaging presence and just genuine love for people, and that has manifested in her professional career. And I could go on and on about her, but I'm going to let you get to learn more about Miss Tresca Grannum. How are you?
Fine, Wendy.
Good,
Thank you for inviting me.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Good to see you. I'm glad you're kind of a jet setter all over the place traveling. So you said I just got into town a little while ago. So
Yes.
So happy to have you on the show. But share with the viewers, of course, we're a university and we want to promote education. I'm eager. I know a little bit about them, your background, but I would like for them to know about your educational pursuits, where you did your undergraduate work, graduate work, and what then led you to the current profession that you spent some years in and you're still doing.
Yes. Well, I grew up here in Albany, Georgia, and again, grew up in Holly Home Projects, and graduated from Westover High. And then I went off after graduation to Fisk University. I was there for 2 years. Unfortunately, growing up in the projects, you really didn't have a place where you can prepare for college.
Okay.
And so really didn't have the money nor the funds to continue on. So I went into the United States Air Force. Did my time there for 6 years and was a counselor, even in the Air Force, a student training advisor. And then years later, I went on to Arizona State University when I was around 38 and finished with my bachelor's degree because I did 2 years at Fisk, and wanted to do social work and really wanted to start an agency where I can provide services of all kinds of services, but especially mental health services.
Yes.
So I got my bachelor's in social work degree from Arizona State, and then went on to University of Denver, where I received my master's of social work with the focus more in community administration and development.
Excellent.
So my goal really was to start a mental health agency, provide services as well as career services, because I'm a career counselor as well.
Okay.
So I wanted kind of a one-stop place where people can come, not only be helped emotionally, physically, as far as helping them with areas within their physical body, but also a place where we can help them professionally to grow. And so that's what I started in Texas.
Outstanding. So and almost a holistic approach in terms of overall well-being.
Exactly.
Outstanding. And it's so neat. And you and I, before we actually started the taping, we were just having a brief discussion on, and I think I unfairly said that it's, certain communities, and it probably is across the board, just we as human beings. And so it is more pronounced, I'm sure, in some, that's probably better or fairer statement to make, in some communities than it is in others. And the point that I'm trying to make is we don't always do the job that we should in taking care of our physical being.
Yes.
So we're, and it might be because of financial reasons that we don't do it, exposure in terms of the importance of just taking care of ourselves. So if we're doing a poor job in terms of going to the doctor and getting the treatment and being proactive in our health, physical being, I would have to say, and you correct me if I'm wrong, oftentimes we do an even poorer job as it relates to our mental and our emotional health.
Yes.
Yes.
Not sure why that's the case,
Okay.
but I remember growing up in the community, and we didn't really have places where there were resources for mental health. We had social workers, but their job primarily was more case management. A lot of us were on welfare. They came out to check on whether or not, we still under the poverty limit. Is mom making too much money?
Right.
Is there a boyfriend living in the house? But other than that, really didn't have a lot of direction for mental health, and that's unfortunate. And so when I look at our community, a lot of us, especially children growing up in the projects, we were suffering from a lot of mental health issues.
Certainly.
Especially post-traumatic stress syndrome, a lot of domestic violence we watch, a lot of abuse, sexual, emotional, physical abuse was all around us.
Yes.
And yet we had no one to go to really talk about in order to get help for. And I realized that was so important because for myself, I carried a lot of pain because I didn't get a chance to really talk to anyone about the things I was struggling with.
Sure.
And because of fear, going back into that environment, if you told anyone, then the repercussion of what would happen just by telling. And so I watched and experienced a lot of pain, a lot of people, alcoholism, domestic violence, a lot of fear that was dominating in our community. However, it was just a kind of, that's the way life is.
A normal sense of it was normalized.
It
was
very normalized.
Which is unfortunate. And so what I've learned, and I on a personal level, particularly as it relates to, and I'm going to use myself as an example as it relates to grief. And so with the loss of my mother, I've kind of, because I didn't want to deal with the grieving process of it. And so you just kind of put it away. But what I quickly learned is that if you don't address it, then it will consume you.
It will.
And that'll start playing out.
Exactly.
And then I was reminded too of something that you said, the pain of whatever the experience is that you've had to endure as an individual, whatever your conditions are. And then we need to say that, and you were using yourself as an example as it relates to growing up in the projects, but you know, pain and dysfunction and hurt and abuse of what it crosses socioeconomic spectrum.
Exactly.
So you can find it in the most affluent areas.
Yes.
But again, the pain of it all, it will then manifest if you do not deal with it. And I was reminded of a conversation that I had years ago with Susan Taylor, the former editor-in-chief of Essence Magazine. And she said, Wendy, you have to remember, hurt people hurt. Yeah. So they will unconsciously act out that behavior because they have not dealt with the pain that they've experienced at some point or ongoing in their lives.
That's
and
true.
So you were able to work through that. I'm sure, as we all do, it sometimes it's a daily trek.
Yes.
Yeah, and working with that. But what I love about you is you said that if I can help somebody that has gone through experiences that I have and help them to show them that this is not consuming, it doesn't have to be, and there's a way out of this to have a healthier and better life. So how long did you have the counseling presence, and was it here in this area or in Texas?
Yes, matter of fact, when I got out of the Air Force, moved to Florida, and went through some counseling courses at Liberty University there. There used to be an offshoot from the one in Virginia. However, they changed, and so it was a different campus, but it was wonderful. So I started taking courses there. And so for me, Wendy, I've always been a counselor, even as a little child.
Okay.
Even in the projects, even though we were poor, my friends were poor, I would still give to them and try to take care of them and give advice, you know, even as a little child. So that cheerleader, that counselor was always in my DNA. And
that was your calling.
It was from the very beginning. And so, so as I grew up, and when it was in Florida, we decided my husband moved to Arizona, and so we traveled to Arizona, and that's where I went back to school. And when I got out of Arizona and went to finish school in Denver, I was wanting to start an agency there. And my husband got transferred at that point to Texas. And still that was my passion. So what I decided to do, before I started an agency, I wanted to mentor women. And so we had monthly meetings. So from my church, some of the ladies would meet at my house, and then people from the community would come to my house. We outgrew my house. And so, and then we went to a larger house. And so this was a monthly event where women were nurtured and loved and encouraged spiritually, emotionally. A lot of the women too had a lot of abuse, a lot of terrible past experiences, and it was a safe place where women can come and share. Well, eventually I was recruiting at St. Edward's University for their counseling program, and eventually I began to kind of help the women grow and be free. And then Dad, my Lord, said, it's time to move on. It's time to open up your agency now. But now I have the women to help me build the agency.
Excellent.
So here were women I had been poured into their life for about 5 years. And now some of them were counselors, and actually were just going back to school, graduating, doing their internships. And so here's an agency they can come and be nurtured and grow.
Sure.
And so I started the agency 5 years after the mentoring program. Continued mentoring, but in a different way.
Okay.
Now I had groups where women can come and men can come. My husband would host groups as well, so that people can come and share and find a safe place to grow. And so I had, it was called His Fullness Ministry and HFM Counseling Center. So the counseling center was there for 5 years, 2010 to 2015. And I had the ministry for 10 years. And it was a wonderful place, again, to see people's lives changed and transformed, loved on with unconditional love. And so it really prospered.
Outstanding.
And one other thing I wanted to say to you, Wendy, as you were talking, unfortunately, probably 80% of my clients were white, white and Hispanic.
Okay.
20% again were African Americans, and most of them came from foster care. I had a contract with Medicaid.
Interesting.
But my goal was, it was beautiful, is I had a playroom, and I saw children from ages 2 to people who were 80. And I wanted them to enjoy the same care and attention they would if they had paid $150 an hour.
Absolutely.
So there was no difference in the services received.
Wonderful.
Regardless of how much, and some couldn't pay. And so we had scholarships, or we just gave them sessions for free. I collaborated with a lot of other community organizations. There was one called St. Samaritan's Health Services, and what they did, they provided clinical services for the underinsured. So even though you may be working, you may not have enough money to buy insurance. So they were kind of like they made too much to qualify for Medicaid or Medicare, but they were right there in the middle. And so we provided free services for them.
Outstanding. So there's so many dynamics at play as it relates to just receiving health care.
Yes.
The main thing is affordability, and
Yes.
we're still seeing that play out at the federal level with,
Yes.
with the new administration and what President Obama did as it relates to affordable care. And so one of those important aspects is the whole mental health. You brought up the piece about your clients were primarily Caucasian or Hispanic. I'm not sure where the stigma occurred within the African American community that was just taboo. And I remember hearing as a child that oh, we don't have to deal with that, and we just pray our issues away, or we go take a nap, or all of that. And it was said in humor and jest, and then perhaps, there was a level of seriousness, because we again start seeing all of, they were always there. And why wouldn't we have mental health issues, just considering as to how we even arrived on these shores. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yes, Wendy.
And I'm speaking of just the whole psychological remnants and effects of the institution of slavery itself. But let's fast forward to today. Let's make an appeal, and then I want to segue into your books and that you're an author. But let's make an appeal, and you as a counselor, share with the viewers why it is important to, I even say, just periodically go get a mental health checkup.
Yes. I think the stigma really is, it's interesting that we share a lot. We talk.
Yes.
And so because we talk, you tell me something that's going on with you. I tell Sarah Lou, and Sarah Lou tells, and so before you know it, everybody knows what's going on with me.
Okay.
And so that kind of privacy, that kind of confidentiality really is not something that's really known in our community.
Okay.
We are a community that like to share and talk, and somehow we don't sense that need of protecting each other's confidentiality.
Okay.
We don't say, okay, this is just between you and me.
Right.
We trust that it will be just between
Right.
you and me.
But we don't establish those parameters.
No, and before I know it, so-and-so know it. And so what it does for each one of us causes us to go into a shell and hide because I realize I can't really trust. You and I can be girlfriends at this level, but I realized from my first encounter with you that I couldn't really trust you. So those things I keep to myself.
I see.
And then our parents, again, modeled to us, especially my parent, taught us how to just pull up your big girl panties and move on.
Keep it moving, right, right.
And so they never talked about deep hurt issues. You know, they kind of just, it's about survival. And I understand that. I understand it at every level. It's about surviving and, you know, living from day to day. And so, but never stopping the cart and say, wait a minute, let's pull over for a few minutes because there's some things that need to be addressed or taken care of.
Certainly.
And so that's what we've learned. It's been passed on from generation to generation that's all we do. We don't really, and if we do tell, it may be, you know, somebody, you know, at the church or someone who really is not invested in us in a particular area.
Right.
Emotionally, spiritually, yes, let's pray. I love what you just said, Wendy. It's so true. Let's just pray about it and God will take care of it. That's true too. But the most important thing, I'm understanding the importance of talking. I was thinking of a scripture the other day of why therapy is important. Why going to a pastor? Why going for counseling? The scripture says, confess your faults one to another that you may be healed. I learned the power of breaking shame and guilt and struggles is to bring it into the light. As long as it is kept to yourself and you and God, it has power.
It does.
But the moment you share it
Yes,
and you bring it out,
freeing
it's
and
freeing because somebody else is out there with me now, and
Yes.
regardless of what they decide to do with it, but it's in the light.
Right, right.
And I remember when I began to share, you know, my pains and my struggles, there was a freedom that came of learning how to just let it go and move on.
Yes.
To be honest with you, there are a lot of things that I couldn't deal with when I was younger that I'm able to now deal with. And I have to let you know that because some of the things I thought I had dealt with years ago, forgive, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
But there are some deeper issues that had changed my personality, that
Right.
changed who I was, that are now coming to the surface because now I'm more mature and I know that my Father loves me now, that when He's showing me things, I'm not running away. Before, when I was more immature, He would show me things about what's going on in my life and I hide, or, you know, no daddy, no Lord, that's not
Dismiss it.
really true, you know, and just kind of was too painful.
Yes.
But now, because I know the love of my Father and my Lord, He shows me a boo-boo, He shows me something, I say, okay, Dad, let's talk about it.
Right,
Let's
right.
talk about where it came from, how it got there, and then once I'm opening the door to Him, I'm ready to give it to
I
Him.
love that. And the point that I love that might take away from that is because a lot of times instances or pain, we then make that all consuming, or in our minds we process that is now how I am identified by this
Yes.
moment, this horrific or maybe not so horrific experience. And then we self-define ourselves and we
Like
think that that's
that.
how the world will then see us. And that's just a thread of who we
Yes.
are.
Yes,
And however difficult or hurtful or painful, it helped to contribute to the beauty that
Yes.
we also are. So you have to just work through that process.
You do,
Yes,
Wendy.
yes.
And it's painful, and that's why a lot of people don't go to pain, because I'd rather just not deal with it.
Right.
But guess what? You're right. It doesn't go anywhere. It just goes underneath, and you
Right.
build all these layers.
Yes.
Which brings me to the real reality of why I loved working with children.
Okay.
They came in with all this pain, and now I can deal with them where they are without all these layers I have to work with.
Yes.
Adults like us,
We build the layers.
Hey, and I have to take all these layers, and we have to. So it takes time to get to the bottom of
Okay.
where the pain is.
Right.
When we get to the pain, then we can get to healing.
Right.
But until we get
Until we
there,
build it. Yes.
and little children comes in, and Miss Tresca got a boo-boo, my brain hurts, or I'm mad, and they use all this language to help me identify with their pain. Where did it come from?
Right.
And they tell me, and sometimes it takes a little while through play therapy, playing in their world. They forget about I'm an adult, and they're just playing and talking and telling me everything.
Okay.
And in my mind, I'm taking mental
process-
notes.
that's
Oh
right,
yes, because I
that's
got to
right.
make sure
Sure.
the next time I work with them
Gotcha.
that we're able to talk about it freely, more freely.
I love that. I love that. Tell the viewers about these creations of yours.
Salah was called Salah with Love. That's the name of the ministry that I have now. But I thought that was going to be the name of the books.
Okay.
Because I'm just wanting to do a few books. I closed down an agency in 2015, diagnosed with brain aneurysms and some brain atrophy. No longer able to process again like I used to as a therapist, but continue doing pastoral counseling, supporting, praying with people, encouraging them, helping them to understand their true identity. The lie that we put on, the things we've learned, the world has told us who we were, all a lie. And so now helping them to understand the truth. So these two books were born out of pain. I was going through what you were calling grief and loss. I had lost the counseling center. I was sick. I had to close everything down. I contracted staph infection that wouldn't go away. This was in 2016, closed that down. We were having some issues with the attorney. We had turned our medical records over to this agency who was to store them for 22 years, Wendy. They went out of business and didn't even tell us. We had paid all that money.
Oh my goodness.
And then they burned and got rid of all of the medical records, all the children, all the clients. And we had about 6,700 clients that we had to notify that their records are no longer available.
My goodness.
The state and everybody else involved. And so we had to hire an attorney. And so then I had physical problems, I had to have surgery. So 2016 was just a blur in a way. It was full of suffering and pain. And one morning, Daddy gave me a beautiful scripture. You shall go out with peace and be led forth with joy. And I'm going to do a new thing in you. And at that point, I didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to lay in his arms and retire.
Yes.
That's it. Just Jesus and I and my daddy and the Holy Spirit and just live happily ever after. He says, no, babe, we're not done. And so Salah was born. In the midst of all of the suffering, he gave me her name. And then he showed me a picture of a little lamb who was broken and abused and who was desiring to sing and dance. That was me. I love to sing and I love to dance.
Okay.
Oh, I love to dance. And
So you'll have to, are you going to be there on the
my
7th
God,
with Dr. Delancey?
I'm going to write that down. I was listening because I thought, wow. And
I know.
As a young child, that was one of my greatest
Okay.
joy, dance, all modern dance, ballet, you name it. I loved it. And so, but anyway, and that was Salah. She wanted to be free, but she was in bondage.
Okay.
And so this little book was born not only from my experiences, but from experiences of the little children I've worked with over the years, who was in bondage to something, or even the little ones who were in big bodies, grown-up bodies. I saw where they were stuck back in when they were 8 or back when they were 6 and never moved on, though their bodies grew and their little minds grew in certain areas, but they're part of them that was still in a corral.
Sure.
And so that's where this book came from. And it's a book of salvation, of freedom, of love. It deals with loneliness, isolation, fear, courage, determination, perseverance. That's the first one, called The Rescue. Now, My Little Friend Worry is a good one too, because it's an offshoot from this one, because now that she's met the Good Shepherd, her dream has finally come true, but she's guarded. She really don't trust. That's wonderful. And so that book really is written for a lot of foster parents who actually adopt children into their family. And the honeymoon phase is wonderful. The children's in a new environment, but then the children revert back to their old patterns because it takes time to learn to trust. And so they go back to their old patterns, their old friends. They want to hang out with the old because they're not very familiar
with the new. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And how many of us are like that?
Guilty. Guilty.
We revert back to something that's old and used.
Thought I was done with that.
Hello.
I know.
The old robe that you can't throw away.
Oh my gosh.
It's got holes in it and everything, but it just keeps me so warm.
Oh
you
my
got
goodness.
a new one. You done bought a new one, but
yeah, that's why you made me think of it. I'm going to share this story. I don't know that I've told this story ever, but you just reminded me that because sometimes when we're on the outside looking in at a situation or observing individuals or their conditions and their circumstances, and we're baffled, why do they stay in that? Why do they? And it's that sense of familiarity, and then we think dysfunction or something that does not make sense through our lens. Why are they staying in that? But if that's all that you know,
that's all you know.
And then it takes courage and bravery and to be introduced and to even want to then walk into something else different and then begin to embark upon that behavior. That's a process. So your old robe that you mentioned that we don't want to get rid of.
Yes,
I was still married at the time, and I'm sure, I don't know if my ex-husband remembers this or not. We were living in Japan, and I love shoes.
Yes.
And so I had a pair of shoes that I love.
Yes.
And Tresca, I loved them so much a little hole appeared at the sole. Why I didn't take them to the cobbler, I don't know. But my point is, I threw them away.
Yes.
And I will share with the world today, I was like, yeah, I can still do something with them. Went and retrieved them out of the trash. And it wasn't a matter that I didn't have other shoes, but it was just, and they looked beat up. They should have. And so I went and got them, and I sat down like, now if I just get a piece of cardboard, don't wear them in the rain. And so when I started having that conversation with myself, and I said, you do need to do a mental health checkup now. You need to go see somebody. I went and threw them back in the trash, but it was just that they were so comfortable and they made me feel good.
Yes.
And I could wear them with everything.
Yes.
And so I get that thought process. This is what I know. So
and I probably, Wendy, would have, girl, put on these shoes, and you went, okay, Tresca. But
and then when you left,
hello, you see what I'm saying? And that's us. We try to change people.
Back. Yes,
we see where they are, and let me just go fix them, and they go back, and then we get mad because no, they're not ready.
Absolutely.
When they're ready, that's what I learned about change.
I know.
Change happens when I'm ready to change, not when you say I'm
ready. When
ready.
You're ready. Yeah.
So some of my clients, I sat with them for weeks. We just sat, and I just with them. I was present with them, waiting on them. And so we talk about all around the bushes and all around and I can see the elephant in the room, but everybody want to go.
I know.
And so eventually, when they felt they could trust me, it's about trust again.
Sure.
They began to let down the little walls and allow me to come in. I always look at it like this. They're a house, and sometimes they only let me through the fence. Open the gate, they'll let me in the yard. Then sometimes they'll let me on the porch, and then they'll peek through me at me through the window, but they're still not ready to let me in.
Right.
And then they'll let me into the living room.
Gotcha.
And really, when trust has been earned, I'm able to go into the bedroom. Okay. And that's where we stuff all of our intimate stuff. That's where all the pain is there, all the loss, all of that. And so, but that's what Father does with us in His loving grace. He's not pushy. He just knock on the door. We say, no, thank you. Can you sit on the porch? I'll be out in a minute. And we sit on the porch and we rock with them for a little bit, know.
Yes.
But He wants more. He wants all of us.
Absolutely.
But He's very patient.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yes.
Whatever that life force is that you tap into or identify with, very, very patient.
Yes.
So tell the viewers, how can they reach out to you? You're again, the globe. I think it's that military life, and we should travel. So I know you have a base in Florida.
Yes.
Family's still here.
Yes.
But if someone wants to reach out to you, they may not be able to take advantage of your services directly, but I know you will graciously, as you do, share with them where they can get it. So how can we learn more about what it is that you're able to provide as a counselor?
If you go into salawwithlove.com, you can reach me there. There's a contact page. I'm actually doing a workshop every week now for 8 weeks here in Albany.
Excellent.
Right out at my dad's church, the Glorious Church of Jesus Christ.
Okay.
I'm hosting and it's donation only, because some people can afford it and some people can't.
Sure.
But it's on true identity. It's really learning who you are, and also going into some emotional issues, if you like.
Sure.
That will be after the workshop. I'm offering some pastoral counseling hours on Saturdays from 1 to 6, and then on Sundays from 2 to 6.
Okay, and what, tell the location again is?
The Glorious Church of Jesus Christ is at 2715 Sylvester Road.
Okay, very good.
Yes,
very
not
good.
too far from
Very
here.
good. And then the website again?
salahwithlove.com.
Okay, outstanding. So tell me what you envision for in terms of your before we wrap up, what your outreach, what your ministry will look like. If I gave you a timetable the next 5 years, what level of impact would you like to have?
I would really like to, again, my passion is always been my family, which is the African American community. I'm part of an international organization called Network 220. It's primarily a lot of Caucasians. And so we just had our conference. We have them every year, and it was in Baton Rouge, and we'll have our next one in Dallas. And I looked around, and I'm the only African American. And so normally I've been there with them for 10 years, and normally there are like 3 or 4 or 5 of us, you know. But my prayer has been diversity. Now, Creflo Dollar is now connected with Andrew, our president. And so Andrew goes there to Creflo Dollar's church every year and do conferences and workshops there. And so we all do the same thing. However, I haven't seen Creflo and all his family come out to the conferences. I'm like, hey, Creflo, can you please come out and bring all of your people? Yes, because again, it's about diversity. And I love diversity. So my passion is to, again, connect different pastors and leaders and be a resource for them to help heal, bring me in, let me spend time with you and your congregation sharing, and also providing pastoral counseling as well as the little children.
Yes, yes.
Sharing the books.
Sure, and I love that. That's a great way for us to wrap this segment up. Is just teaching them early on that just as we tell you that you need to go to the doctor for if you're immunization or if you have a cold or a checkup, and to see how you're developing physically, that the mind it's interconnected. Right. So that has to be right for the physical to function and vice versa. So teaching them that at an early age, how to deal with that, and that it is not a solo journey, that the resources in place. I'm a big proponent of speaking it, and then inevitably the universe just lines it up, so then you meet a counselor like Tresca Grannum or somebody is placed in your life to help you get the services that you need. So we want to help to remove, and I thank you for this conversation today, remove the stigma that is associated with seeking mental health, and just making it a part of our regular regimen as we move forward in life. It was a pleasure having you on the show. I'm so excited about what the future has in store for you and how you will continue to impact not just this community, but wherever you plant your lovely feet.
Thank you, Wendy.
You're very welcome. Viewers, thank you so much for joining me for this edition of Realizing Potential. I'm Wendy Wilson, and I will see you next time.